Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the ScruffyMovies podcast. I'm Zach Wallace.
And I'm John Crocker.
And today we're going to have an awesome episode for you guys. It's just going to be us kind of freeballing here about horror movies.
Freeballing.
Freeballing? What are you talking?
That's what you just said.
I know. Why did you repeat it? Freaked me out.
Because it was hilarious. That was a great choice of words.
Oh, all right. Well, it freaked me out. I didn't know why. I didn't know why you just repeated it. Oh, no. Now I'm thrown off. Oh, no. We're going to talk about horror movies.
Halloween.
This is our Halloween episode. So we're going to just talk about horror movies, all different kinds. Crocker watched a lot he hadn't seen for this podcast. I'm just going to kind of go with it, see where we end up. I've had to tear him away from Red Dead Redemption 2, which just came out the day that we're recording this, and he's been playing since
last night at midnight. Like the moment it came out, about 11:55, I started spamming the download button on my Xbox, and it finally downloaded right at midnight, right on time.
I did get a lot of questions at work about how I was going to try and tear you away from this game today in order to record this podcast. But everything seems to be good now. The Xbox is still on, and it's just staring us in the face with Red Dead Redemption 2. But hopefully we can maintain for an hour.
Oh, you have to take a little bit of time off to eat some food, get some water, go to the bathroom, record a podcast,
And then, but other than that, Red Dead Redemption 2.
Other than that, for this entire weekend, maybe other than a little bit of football, will be Red Dead Redemption 2.
Well, speaking of dead horror movies, now I know you got some notes, as always, if you want to kick it off with what you were thinking.
Yeah, so as you guys know, for the past few podcasts, we've been going back over some of the more classic horror movies of the, of the years, I should say. And as that was going on and people were listening to the podcast and we were sort of going back and forth with ideas, there were a few movies that sort of stood out as what everyone said, oh, you need to watch this. If you like those, you'll like this. Sort of the newer horror movies that I've been a bit behind on. So 3 in particular, actually 4, if you count the one we watched the other night, it would be Cabin in the Woods, It Follows, and Get Out. So I've just recently seen all of those in the past few days, and they were all better than I thought they were going to be. I mean, I know they were like highly recommended from everyone who likes horror movies, so I knew that they weren't going to be bad, but they were really good. It actually has, and I know I say this every week, makes me want to pay a lot more attention to the horror genre than I actually do.
And those are movies, that was when you asked me the question, what movies should I watch? Those were like the first ones that came to my head because I like them so much, those specific ones. And so really we can just start breaking those down little by little. So we watched Cabin in the Woods last week at our Scary Movie sleepover at work. What did you think about that one? Because that one is that one's still recent, but a little less recent than the other ones on the list.
I liked it a lot. I liked sort of the duality of what was happening in the movie, where you have the people that are actually living out the experience, and then you have, I guess, what would be the government guys, sort of controlling everything, flipping all the switches, making sure all the stuff is actually happening as they want it to happen. And I thought that was an awesome, interesting take that I didn't expect. I had no idea that I was going into that because it had been so long since I'd seen a trailer or anything for that movie. I went in completely blind. The first few times they popped up, I was like, oh, what role are these guys going to play, And as the story played out, I thought it was really great. I love, it's not necessarily like that breaking of the fourth wall, but they almost, it could almost be said that they almost told the story of how to tell a horror story.
Oh, yeah. They're definitely winking at the camera, for horror fans. They're definitely like, hey, guys, get this one? Do you get it?
Exactly. There was a lot of that stuff that was really kind of cool to see actually play out in what would almost be, in some aspects, like a comedy horror a little bit. Not as much as others, but I enjoyed it. What did you think about it?
Oh, I loved it. I got to go see it in theaters when it came out in 2012, I believe. And so, I mean, the first time you watch it is a little like, what is going on? You're really trying to figure it out. And then they were breaking bottles of blood, and it was filling up these little shapes of people in the basement below the government building. And I was like, what is happening? And then, like, of course, as the movie goes on, you start figuring out more and more and more and more. Also, one of the craziest climaxes to a horror movie I've ever seen. Literally any monster you can think of in a horror movie is in the government building killing somebody.
Yeah. And I thought it was kind of a throwback to, like, ancient Egypt style, like, blood filling up the outlines of the bodies in the basement. Is really sort of like mummy-esque kind of feeling about it, you know?
And then you find out it is to sacrifice, like, they're sacrificing people to the ancient ones.
Exactly.
And, like, all this stuff. And then as they're going through and they're like, oh, Japan wiped and all this stuff. And it's just showing little video screens of all these different parts of the world that's saying failed. And it's dead monsters or, like, whatever. And it was just the first time you watch it, you are like, what? Like, you enjoy it, but it's very confusing at first. And then I will give it credit, the more, like, if you went and watched it right now, you would notice all these little things, like, from the beginning, because you know what's going on, that you're like, oh, okay.
Totally.
Now I get it.
Definitely one of those movies where you go back and watch it and you see in every scene there's something else for you the second time around. Mm-hmm. I could imagine.
Yeah. I also really like that it kind of played with the notion of what it means to be a scary movie and, like, who can make it out of a scary movie alive. Like, they classify them down to their archetypes from other scary movies. Yep. And still they're like, yeah, it doesn't matter if the virgin survives or what. Like, she can do whatever. And then it ends up, like, the stoner survives. And he's the only one that's known what's going on the whole time and is there to help and all this stuff. Because you just normally don't see that kind of stuff. And so I really like when horror movies kind of play with the notions of what's going on.
Yeah, it was very much like Truman Show introduced into a horror movie.
Yeah,
you know,
and it's funny now because retroactively and progressively, you can take the Cabin in the Woods concept and apply it to literally any other horror movie.
Yep,
and it works. It's just that one, like, those were the successful attempts. Cabin in the Woods was just the one unsuccessful one.
And I hope that if in the future, for some weird reason, the horror genre, like, starts taking on any other tropes or starts to develop any other sort of archetypes and stereotypes, that they come back out with another Cabin in the Woods to address those.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel like now it's sort of a needed, almost like baseline to under all of the other horror movies.
I did see something really funny where it said, like, the movie premiered and the director was there to do a Q&A, and the first question he was asked at the Q&A was, is there going to be a sequel? And, I mean, of course, the end of the movie is the Ancient Ones rising, the end of the world.
Right.
Like, the Earth is gone. And somebody's like, is there going to be a sequel? And he just kind of looked at him and he was like, did you watch the movie just now? Did you see the end?
But it could be like a government Inception style, like, Truman Show inside of a Truman Show.
The Ancient Ones rising was the horror all
that
along.
That was the planned
sacrifice.
ending. Yes, it actually went as planned.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? I entrust that writer. It was co-written by Joss Whedon, who made Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which is my favorite show of all time, and also Drew Goddard, who I really like a lot, and he directed it as well. So I trust if anybody can come up with a cool idea for a sequel, it's those guys.
Oh yeah, and like anything else in the horror movie genre, if you want to bad enough, you can totally narrate out any problems that you might have.
Oh yeah, I mean, that's Jason and Freddy and Michael die in every movie, and then every other movie when it starts, it's just like, here's how they come back.
Exactly.
Because I mean, they make it a finality too in a good majority of those movies. Like, I remember specifically they don't even really explain it in between Nightmare on Elm Street 3 and Nightmare on Elm Street 4. Like, they find Freddy's buried body in 3, unbury it, do like this ritual sacrifice on his bones or whatever, like rebury his bones and all this stuff. And it's like, okay, Freddy's done for good. We did this. And then in the 4th movie, he's just back where they buried his bones, kill somebody, and he's like, haha, now I'm back again. And it's not really like, it was like there was no reason for him to come back. He just came back.
So, not actually being alive through the 80s, because neither one of us were.
No.
We are almost to the point now where a lot of these more famous franchise, lineages, we can expect for them to bring back at, like, any time. But if you were truly loving it and seeing them as they came out in the 80s, early 80s, when they got to the end of an episode and they were killed off, I mean, the entire world would go years at a time never knowing if their favorite slasher or whoever it was actually going to come back. We never actually had to live through that, and we've almost gotten to the point where in the world we live in, where we understand that if you want to reboot any franchise ever as possible, you can do it. But I feel like back in those days, when they killed someone off, like, you never really knew or if you could expect another movie. And I think, especially back in the 80s, horrors were sort of like at a climax just as a genre. So not only did you have your favorite people dying off, but the whole genre was going down. So it almost felt like it could truly be not just the end of your favorite stories, but your movies as well, you know?
Yeah, I think it's funny that you brought up that point, because I've always thought this in our kind of Marvel Cinematic Universe state type franchise building world that we live in now. Movies are announced 3 or 4 at a time.
Oh yeah.
Or like what have you. Like you go to see the first one and it's like, oh, they've greenlit a second one. Like, I love the MCU, but they've lost their credibility in the punch of Infinity War a little bit by all these people who died in Infinity War already have movies announced, so you know they're coming back. You just don't know how. Spider-Man's been shooting his movie. Like, they've announced it. They've announced the title. Spider-Man's back. But, like, Spider-Man died in Infinity War. In the MCU continuity, as we know it right now, Spider-Man is dead. But we know he's coming back already.
Right.
So, and it's not even a thing that we have to wait until a year from Infinity War to Avengers 4 to find out. It's, oh, well, they already announced the Spider-Man movie before Infinity War. I know he's coming back. And even as soon as I got done watching Infinity War, and a good majority of the people I've talked to after have just gone, oh, well, they're coming back. And it's not even a question in their minds anymore of if they're coming back or not. It's just, this franchise is successful. It's going to continue.
With how movies are made today, I wonder if it would even be possible to truly keep an entire production like under wraps. Like, if they could shoot the next Spider-Man movie and have a code word for it or whatever you want, so that no one else really around knew that that was actually a Spider-Man movie. And that way it would lend a little bit more oomph to movies like Infinity War.
Yeah, there is. I don't know if they could do it with that big a budget movies. I don't think they could.
I don't think they could either. I think there's too many people that are like invested in it and they're tracking it, that you really just can't get away with it. Which, you know, like a perfect segue to that is what we started talking about is Red Dead Redemption, the video game that just came out. They did a fantastic job of literally not telling anything at all. And they only dropped like 3 trailers in the entirety of their marketing. And with most, even like video games now, you sort of can understand what to expect. But they were able to keep it a secret, I think, because they're a still semi-small, like few 100-person maximum development team that all works in the same 3 buildings every day. But when you're talking about movies and you're traveling around the world and you have producers and people that are actually investing in giant studios and folks that are legitimately projecting revenue for decades at a time in the future, I honestly don't think it would be possible for them to truthfully keep it under wraps. It's hard enough now for a spoiler and a twist at the end of a movie to be kept under wraps, much less the entire fact of filming.
Yeah, there is one movie, which kind of brings us back around to horror movies, that I know that has been successful at doing that, and it was I don't know if you've ever heard of the Hatchet movies.
I've heard of them. I don't know if I've seen
They're
one.
very good. I love them. They're really good horror comedies. But basically, the guy who made them, his name's Adam Green. He wrote and directed them. He, from the very beginning, when he came up with the idea for Hatchet, he's like, it's going to be 3 movies, that's it. So the 3 movies came out, and he's like, okay, that's it. They kill Victor Crowley at the end, who's the main bad guy. And he's like, okay, done, whatever, done. Not making any more whatsoever. Done for forever. And so just years went by. He started making other movies and stuff. And people kept being like, oh, Hatchet 4 would be cool. And he's like, yeah, but I told my story. I don't want to do anymore. It's all done. Whatever. It's finished. And so he works with a really close team, which is the only reason why I think they could have gotten away with this. Everybody who he works with is basically friends who he's cherry-picked to be in the movie, and like crew and producers that he's worked with for like 10 years.
Right.
So it's the only reason he got away with this, with doing the 4th movie in secret. But basically, and it's still a cool video, even if you're not a Hatchet fan, because people just freak out. It was in 2016. It was the 10-year anniversary of the first Hatchet movie. So he set up this big thing for everyone to come to a theater in LA. It was going to be a 10-year anniversary screening of Hatchet. They had re-edited footage in and stuff like that. So all these huge like Hatchet fans came, and he's giving this big long speech about everything, about how he was really down in the dumps, and like this interaction he had with George A. Romero kind of changed his life and put him back on track. And so just near the end of it, he's like, and because of that, we're not going to be watching Hatchet 1 tonight. We're going to be watching a brand new Hatchet movie. They had filmed it in secret, like completed it. It was done. They didn't release any trailers, tell anybody about it. Nobody knew anything about it until the night it premiered to an audience.
And that was 2016?
That was 2016.
That's impressive.
And I remember getting on my phone, like at work on break, and it was like, Hatchet 4 has already been shot. They just premiered it last night. They shot it in secret, didn't tell anybody. It's done. It's ready to go. They showed it last night. People are freaking out about it. And I was like, what? Like, I started freaking out, and I wasn't even there. I just was reading an article at work. But that's the only movie where I've ever seen it be successful.
Now, what's the quick synopsis of Hatchet? Because I feel like I've just by the title alone, I want to say that I've seen that movie, but I can't picture any of it.
It's a spirit in a swamp who people keep going to the swamp. The first movie is like a haunted swamp tour goes into the swamp. Their boat sinks, and so they're all on land trying to get back. And the swamp has this mythical story about a man named Victor Crowley, who they call Hatchet Face, and he's this evil spirit who stays haunting the swamp and kills people. And so eventually they run into him. And then the second movie is like, we don't believe what happened in the first movie. Victor Crowley's a myth. I'm going to take a bunch of badass hunters and stuff into the woods to go shoot him and kill him. They all start dying. Third movie is the cops are like, okay, something's going on in this swamp. A lot of people are going in and not coming out. We got to go. So they bring like a tactical squad together, go in to the swamp. They all start dying.
Nice.
So it is over like the course of a weekend, like like it's all
three
right together. Yeah. And each movie I really like in the first trilogy ends like the first movie ends with Victor Crowley screaming in a girl's face, just ends right in the middle of him screaming. Second movie begins with him screaming in her face.
So yeah, literally picking up.
Yes. Literally picks up right where it left off. And you carry on to the next movie.
It sounds awesome. It's not really ringing any bells.
It is really good. I would highly suggest them. Victor Crowley might be my favorite one, too. The fourth movie that they just came out with might be my favorite one.
Now, how long ago did the originals come out?
2006 was the first Hatchet.
Okay. So a decade.
8 or 9 was the second, and like I think 2010 or 11 or 12 was the third, and then 2016 was the fourth.
Awesome.
Yeah, and they are really good. Highly suggested.
Yeah, they, as well as every other movie we mentioned, will be added to my to-watch list, which is ever-growing as the days go by.
Right, well, I guess we can kick it back to those original four. That Cabin in the Woods kind of took us for a turn.
Well, that's fine. So how about It Follows? What'd you think about that?
That was another one I saw in theaters, and the only information I had on it was people in the horror movie community on Facebook, Instagram, whatever, were saying scariest movie I've ever seen. And I was like, well, that's crazy. I'm going to have to go see that movie. And so I went to go see it, and it scared the crap out of me in the theater, because I don't know how the experience translates to just hanging out at your house and watching it.
Yeah.
But in a theater, and you're like in an enclosed dark room, and I hadn't seen it, so I had no idea what stuff was going to happen when. And they do a really good job of messing with you in that movie, because they're able to, you don't know if anybody in the background at any time could just turn towards the main girl and start walking towards her.
Right.
And that's the monster now.
Yeah, it wasn't as scary as it would have been with a legitimate theater sound system to really punch home.
Theater was terrifying.
Yeah. You know, the vibrating under your butt at the same time as the sound sometimes really kind of helps drive it. I liked it. I enjoyed it. It was probably one of the more scary movies I'd watched recently, but it wasn't like overly scary. I really liked just the concept. Like, I thought it was a pretty brilliant concept. Maybe, and not even so much like the STD part of it, which plays a very large role.
It is strange.
That was really weird, but just the monster itself, whatever it was that sort of followed you around, could take any shape. Like, I thought that was really kind of ingenious, and I think there's a lot that you could do with that. Like, I liked that concept enough that I would definitely want to see them bring that back around.
And I really like also that they didn't explain it at all in the movie. Literally, the only information we have is what the girl knows, and it's somebody just telling her something's coming after you now. If it catches you, you're dead.
Yeah, that seemed kind of thin, which they made up for it when they went and tracked down the original guy again, and they were like, "Tell me more," we need more information. But when it first was really kind of kicking off in the first part of the movie, I was thinking, is this all we're going to get? It was like he yelled at her really quick, and I barely made out every other word he said, and now that's all we have to go on for the rest of the movie.
Right.
But they did a pretty good job at actually sort of rolling it out and explaining it to you, and with the whole group of friends, they kind of had to explain it a few times. So each and every time you got a little bit, of additional details, I guess. But I thought it was really cool. I liked the slow walking. You can buy yourself time.
Yeah.
I am curious though. Like, could you hop on an airplane? And
it would that's what it would just keep coming. That's what I thought was so cool. Like, it would find its way to you somehow.
Right. But I want to see someone hop on an airplane and then go to like South America and see how long it takes, and see if you could keep it going back and forth while you were buying yourself enough time to try and live a normal life. Or like, what happens if it has to cross the water? I know it will eventually, but I want to see him toy with the idea of like pushing the boundaries.
I know, but see, I almost want to have it like, okay, I just saw it on the sidewalk, and then so I can just go like a couple miles away or something, like enough away, because I feel like the South America thing, like you said, you don't know how long it's going to take to get there. So eventually you're just going to get comfortable, and you're like, probably not going to get here for a while, whatever, and you're going to get comfortable with it, and it could surprise you and be there within the year.
Yeah, but
and so if you don't keep your head on a swivel, you start getting comfortable in this South America lifestyle, and you're just out in public or something, and something is right there beside you, and it's walking at your face, and you just turn, and you're like, uh-oh.
Yeah, I mean, it would definitely, like, you would have to set up an encampment and, like, wait for it to come.
Yeah.
And then fly back to the same spot and, like, time exactly how long it takes.
Yeah.
Like, there would be some math involved in, like, what happens if you fly over the top of it? Does it turn around immediately, or does it go to where you last were? Like, I mean, there's all these things that you could play with. And one of my other big questions about that movie was, if this is a sexually transmitted thing, after, like, a couple of years, if everyone that has it is really motivated to pass it along to someone else as quickly as they possibly can, and it's with really kind of like a high school aged crowd, I think within like a year, everybody would have had it.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the thing. You could have it, but then it's just getting passed along so much you don't know. Like, nobody explained it to you at the time, and so it's just making its way back down the list.
Yeah, but I feel like the entire school would have it. Like, everyone in the whole town would know about it after like a few months.
I mean, it's just another horror movie where it's like, wow, all these teens are dying. Why are all these teens dying?
Yeah, exactly. No, and
it's just making its way down.
You could totally play that out in that exact fashion, but I think it would be kind of hilarious to see just how quickly STD spread like wildfire when you introduce a massive motive to that crowd. I mean, that would just be something else, because they played enough with the sexual side of things in this movie that if they wanted to double down on it, they could.
Yeah.
I
saw a really cool thing, and I hope that they eventually end up doing it, but it was basically like what the idea for a sequel would be to almost flip it on its head, and the rumored title was going to be Follow It. And it was them tracing the line back to the original person to find out what this monster was and how to defeat it.
That would be pretty badass, is to see just a complete and total flipping of the plot. See kind of how that plays out. Yeah. And the setting was cool too. Like, I loved, and you're seeing this with a lot of horror movies now, as kind of like that 80s throwback.
Yeah.
But particularly with It Follows, I felt like it was not assigned to any era, because like all the cars that you see that everyone's kind of driving around are all from like the 70s and the 80s, but then all of a sudden there'll be like a brand new minivan parked on the side over here, and it's like they completely had no regard for making sure that everything in the background fit any particular era. And then you have sort of like the electronic devices that were like how our phones could have came out, you know, should Apple have not been the ones to originate the iPhone thing, you know, like it's sort of that alternative future that split off of like 1975 or something. So it was kind of, it was a setting without a defined year. And I thought that was really cool, because that then allowed them to play with different things like technology that was in the 80s, but not quite enough that anybody could call anybody and have GPS at any given time. And, you know, it was a cool setting. And I think you're seeing that a lot, not the setting without a particular era thing, but you're seeing a lot of the throwback to the 1980s, 1970s, even with like It, which is a movie we'll talk about here in a second. And Stranger Things is another great one. You know, they're all kind of set back then, which I think the main reason for that is what we covered in either last week's or the weeks before that podcast, where it just makes more sense for a horror movie. It's back then, nobody had cell phones. Yeah. Cars were unreliable. You could literally be in the woods by yourself, and like that was something that happened to regular people back then. You know, it just makes that much more sense. And we're at the perfect spot in 2018 where most people were either alive through that time or know enough about it to really appreciate and get that throwback vibe, which just helps with the movie making process even more.
Yeah. And that, I mean, it's the same argument that I made in the other podcast. I hate when people are like, no cell phone reception. I hate it when they do that in movies.
Yes.
But if they didn't do it, I would hate it more, because I'd be like, why didn't they just use their cell phones? This is stupid. So I hate that cliche of them having to do it. So it just makes it easier. It makes it, you don't have to worry about that issue. And really the 80s and even the 90s to an extent now are like kicked up in pop culture. People are freaking out about the 80s and 90s right now.
Well, what's that old saying, like, you know, every 30 years or whatever, what's old becomes cool again. Yeah. Or what's out of vogue becomes, you know, back in, or whatever it is. And I think that's totally true with everything in life, and movies are no exception. And we're probably going to be seeing more of that. I mean, there's one of my favorite like buddy comedies on Netflix, Hap and Leonard, is set in the 80s, and I think it's absolutely great, you know. Yeah. So there's a lot of that kind of coming back around. Yeah, and that kind of kicks us off towards It. Yeah, totally.
Which I absolutely loved. And I loved the miniseries that came out in the 90s with Tim Curry. That was like a staple of my childhood. And so when they announced the new It had been in kind of development hell for a while, gone through a lot of different writers and directors and stuff. And so when it actually started to come to fruition and be made, I was like, yeah, good luck, guys. Good luck trying to replace my memories with the new It. I bet it won't be half as good. And I remember when it came out on Rotten Tomatoes, and it was like 96% approval rating. And I was like, oh, okay.
Maybe it is okay.
Well, I mean, and I had been excited for that movie, specifically because they had released the scene of them where they find Betty rips some shoe in the sewer before like anything really kicks off. And it was just them talking. And I remember just watching that scene. Nothing with Pennywise, with nothing. And it was just the kids talking. And I went, oh, good. I was like, they got the dialogue right, which is hard to do with children in movies and TV shows and stuff. I think Stranger Things does another really good job of it, of just capturing the dialogue.
And they share a cast member, you know.
Yeah, Finn Wolfhard. Funnily enough, I went to a Days of the Dead event in Atlanta a few years ago with my wife before the new It movie came out. But Stranger Things was already out and popping by then. Right. And 4 of the Stranger Things kids came. Basically, the main kids came. Dustin, Mike, Lucas, and Will were all there. And we bought a photo op with them. And the way it was set up was there was 4 of them. You could go on one side or the other. On the one side was Finn Wolfhard, who is in Stranger Things and who plays Richie in It. And I looked at my wife and I was like, I'm going over there. And she was like, are you going over there because he's in the new It movie? And I was like, he's Trash Talk Tozier. That's one of my favorite characters. Yes, I'm going over there because he's in the new It movie. And then now when it came out and blew up, I was like, yes, I got a picture with him.
Nice. So I'd never seen the originals. I know that was like actually probably when I was a kid, but it was also at that prime time where my parents were like, too scary for you, young one.
Yeah,
you know?
I had the unfortunate outcome of having a older brother who thought it was hilarious that I was scared of clowns, and he loved it. He is obsessed with the new It movie to a point where I didn't think a person could be obsessed with it too. I mean, he's more of a sports guy than a movie guy, but he enjoys movies. It's where a lot of my movie likes come from, is from my brother. He just got a tattoo on his leg like last week of the new Pennywise.
Oh, wow.
When it dropped on digital, he watched the movie. He texted me. He's like, I just watched it. And I was like, oh, cool. Did you like it? He's like, yeah, I'm starting it again. And he watched it like 20 times in the first weekend it was out. I mean, he is obsessed with it. And so he thought it was hilarious when I was a kid to play pranks on me and stuff with it. He told me that it lived under the bed. He even went so far as to go halfway under, put on a latex glove, choke himself under, take the latex glove off, come out, and be like, man, I just got away. And it scared me so bad, I couldn't see the VHS video cover that we had. My mom had to hide it in the attic. And I started putting apple cores and chicken bones under the bed so that it would eat them and not me.
Apple cores and chicken bones.
So I was terrified of it. But that kind of created an obsession with me of the Pennywise It stuff. And it's always just been kind of seared into my brain now.
So were the originals were like a 2-part series, right?
Yeah, it was a mini series. So it was like, it came on, I think, ABC.
So it wasn't like a in theaters.
No.
Okay.
No, it came on TV, and it was kind of how it's broken up now a little bit, but basically it was the adults of the story remembering their childhood in the first part.
Right.
And then it was just the adults in the second part.
Right.
Which, and this one now they've broken up to specifically this movie is about the kids. Specifically, the next movie will be about the adults.
That makes sense. Because growing up, everyone always talked about that movie. And really until the new one came out, I'd never dug enough to have ever known it wasn't just a regular movie with a regular release and everything else. So I think that's kind of interesting that they were able to get away with that back in those days on regular TV, which I don't know. I still haven't seen the originals, so maybe it's not as gory as I'm picturing.
Not necessarily gory, but I mean, it's freaky. I'm still freaked out at clowns now because of that movie. And I'm not scared of the new Pennywise. My fear is very strange because Tim Curry, who played Pennywise in the original, is very good at looking like a regular clown, laughing, having fun, and then just dropping his face, dropping his eyes, and staring at you. And that's what freaks me out.
Gotcha.
Not if a clown looks scary, like the new Pennywise looks scary. I'm not scared of him. I'm not scared of clowns that look scary. But clowns that look regular and then turn on you freaks me out because of that original movie.
Very nice.
And that, I mean, the new movie too. I was telling you this before you started watching, and then after you watched it, I started tearing up at the movie. And I remember just sitting in the theater going, at it? At it? I'm crying?
With the blood circle shake at the end?
Yeah, I started tearing up then, but I teared up more whenever at the very end he gets to see it's Pennywise playing a trick, but basically by playing a trick to try and keep himself alive, he gives Bill the ability to say goodbye to his brother and say he was sorry and that he loved him one last time. And even though it was Pennywise playing a trick, it was nice that he got that moment. And so as they were having that, I was like tearing up. It was like, why is he doing this?
So that brings up a good question. Did the people that were like the kids in stasis, like floating, they're gone? They never came
I think
back.
they're dead. They're in the deadlights.
Okay, is that what it is?
Which is like what he opened his mouth and showed Bev.
Gotcha. Because I was curious. Because occasionally at the end of movies like this, when you beat the bad guy, then, everyone that we thought
it
were
reverses.
dead, it reverses. And they never really hit on that and said whether it did or it didn't. And I think they might have mentioned that the little brother never came back, and that was their way to infer that none of them did. But I was curious about that.
Yeah. And I also, it's interesting in this movie because Pennywise is shown to have the ability to go anywhere at any time. Like, he's just in their house when he wants to be. Like, he can do anything he wants. But he likes toying with them so much more that he accidentally gives them, like, the time they needed to bond together to come back and defeat him.
And they defeated him because they were no longer afraid. Mm-hmm. That's what I picked up on, is like when you stand up and say, you know, I'm no longer afraid of you or whatever, that's when he cannot wield his power over you anymore.
Mm-hmm. And I loved the shot of after they had fought Pennywise all together and they realized that fact, and he's on the ground and he starts backing up and they're all just walking towards him.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I love that, like, reversal that movies can do of just even something as simple as that kind of a shot has just shown the reverse in power to those kids.
Well, I guess since we know the second one is coming, we know that he wasn't totally defeated. But in the end of that one, this is definitely my favorite movie of all the ones that I've recently went back and sort of named off a moment ago. Definitely my favorite out of that group. But I did feel like the ending was a little thin when they were just like, we're kids, but we're not afraid anymore. I was like, okay. Because none of them, I mean, the main girl, she kind of had a moment where, with her father, especially, where she like, I'm not your little girl, stand up, like, get your head right. And I don't know if she was ever truly afraid, which may be why he didn't get her previously. Mm-hmm. So she kind of had that up and coming moment where it would make a lot of sense. But for the rest of them, I feel like they just kind of, all right, all of a sudden I'm not afraid. I'm going to act like I'm not afraid, so we win, kind of thing.
Well, I think it wasn't even necessarily that they were like, I'm going to act like I'm not afraid. It was they saw one of themselves were in danger. One of their friends were in danger. So they started fighting. And then through fighting, I mean, even just the one, like, nobody had jumped on Pennywise until Bill pulled the trigger again on that.
On the kid.
Yeah, on the whatever gun. And
the bolt gun.
Yeah, on the bolt gun. And it started, and they were like, it's not loaded. But because he believed something was in there, when he shot it, it started messing up Pennywise. And I think that kind of started the turn in their heads of, oh, well, he can be hurt. We just hurt him.
Yeah, and it's the domino effect, right? If one member of the tribe gains a foothold, then the next one feels more inclined to take a step forward, and the next one sees that we've gained ground, and then they're more confident, and then it sort of plays out among everyone in the crew. Right,
and it was also, like, really funny at times.
Yeah,
like when when she was shutting the door in Ben's room, and it was the New Kids on the Block poster. Yeah, and it was really heartwarming. And, like, it was a really good coming of age story. I was blown away by it. I couldn't believe it when I got done watching it, how good of a job they had done.
Yeah, actually, one of my friends had just said, like, the previous weekend we were hanging out, and randomly we got to talking about Stranger Things, and he was like, oh, yeah, I really like Stranger Things. And as soon as I watched it, I was like, dude, if you like Stranger Things, if you haven't seen it, you need to go watch it. Because it's the same kind of, like, kids crew in the 80s, coming of age, horror background, like, you know, it's totally in the same vein.
Yeah, and I just love movies where people who were not expected to be thrown in extraordinary situations are, and they have to adapt to that. And it and Stranger Things both are great examples of people people just going about their lives who are thrown into extraordinary situations, have no idea what's going on, but are like, they have an emotional connection to whatever problem's going on, and they're like, I need to rise up and fight. And for some reason, that always just really gets me, which is probably another reason I started crying.
Yeah, you know, like we always talk about with some of these movies, I think there's plenty here to play off of, too. I mean, if the second one, which we know is going to be a huge movie release, if it is a smashing success like the first one was, you know, they already mentioned, like, plenty of events that have happened in the past with the curse, and, like, how did it actually originate? I don't know if we ever figure that out because I've never seen the originals, but I think that there's plenty to play around with, especially in, like, prequel territory. Like, you could flip this back and tell the story of Pennywise in 1,000 different settings because he has, in theory, been around for generations upon generations upon generations.
Mentioning stuff in like the 1800s.
Right.
And Pennywise's whole thing is every 27 years he comes back. So for every 27 years since the 1800s, he's been coming and eating kids.
Yeah. And it sounds like there's some pretty cool stories with that. Like there was one where there was a big fire. There was one like at the factory. And then there was one where it was like sort of taught more about being the actual curse, you know. So I think you could really do a lot of cool stuff with it. And they may not always be, and this is something I kind of like about the idea of the second one, is that you've got kids in one and adults in the other that are telling similar stories and fighting the same villain, but I feel like you're going to get two totally different movies because
I agree.
The people whose journeys you're watching are just in a totally different place in their life.
Yep.
So it will have to play out differently, you know? And if you amp that up, then you could play it out for all kinds of different people in different parts of the world and different eras and all that.
Yeah, I think the first one's definitely like a coming of age horror movie, and the second one I think is going to be more like a drama horror movie.
Yeah.
With like how they are in their lives now, how this has affected them since they were children, how it's going to affect them into the future if they don't stop this now, like all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And which I'm kind of scared for. They have a lot of really good actors, and it's the same guy who played Pennywise, same director. So I have a lot of confidence in the second movie, but at least in the originals, I would always the original VHS came in 2 tapes, and it would be part 1, part 2.
Right.
I only ever watched part 1. Couldn't care less about part 2 with the adults. Couldn't care less.
Well, when you were a kid.
When I was a kid.
Because you saw yourself more in their story.
But now I'm scared that feeling has just carried over. And so when the second one comes out, I'm still going to go see it and probably enjoy it, but I'm still going to be like, man, it was nothing to the first one.
I mean, I have high hopes, especially because it is the same director and all that. And usually when this type of stuff happens, especially for something like It that has always been known as a 2-parter, like I have to believe that he had both scripts written when he shot the first one.
Yeah, he was like ready to go with it.
Ready to go. So, I mean, it could very well be, and we talked about this a moment ago, where you're picking up right where you left off. Like one of my favorite sort of just clips I've seen in movie making was at the end of episode 7 Star Wars, because we haven't mentioned Star Wars yet and we have to in every single podcast, when, you know, she hands the lightsaber out or whatever, there's that zooming back moment where you actually see the entire production crew on the island and they wrap it, you know, smack the thing and say, congratulations, now we're filming episode 8, and start like within seconds in real life, like people still standing in the same spots, you know. So hopefully it was one of those continuations of momentum with the second It coming out. Hopefully it will be.
And they have a lot of really good actors playing the roles in the second one, which is another thing I think I just might not have cared as much about the adult actors, but now that I actually care about these actors who are in it and I've seen them in other things, I probably will care a lot more.
Well, I feel like horror movies are that genre, if there is a genre, where you can absolutely positively get away with having a completely unknown actor or actress. Like horror movies have a tendency to bring people in seemingly off the street that have all of these acting chops that no one had ever seen before because they've never been in any other movie, and a lot of times they'll make a star out of them, you know. But to me, in a horror movie, like who's in it probably doesn't mean as much as it would in any other movie. Now with one that is held to as high of standards as It, you're probably going to have to give in to that and expect that, like you would with any other blockbuster movie, that you're going to have to probably get some big names in there. But I think the good segue over to Get Out, the black guy was from one episode of
Black Mirror.
That's where I immediately recognized him from, and I had to Google that because I was like, that's the dude on the bike from the bike episode of Black Mirror. And the girl was from The League.
And Girls, TV series Girls on HBO.
I've never seen that, but I'm a big fan of The League, which is a great comedy show on Netflix. I think it's only on Netflix. I don't know. But when I saw those two, I was like, oh, they're just pulling all the Netflix potential here, you know? But it's great because those are two, I mean, fantastic actors, or an actor and an actress. And I want to see them in more stuff. So I'm happy that they kind of have moved up and out of what they were in. Black Mirror is weird. Like Black Mirror isn't a traditional TV show. So like even if you star in Black Mirror, like he was, you're really only in one episode.
Yeah.
And he did a great job in that episode. And I don't really know if he's been in much else. So I'm glad to see that kind of.
Well, now he's like, Get Out has just shot him up.
Right.
He was nominated for an Academy Award for Get Out.
Really?
Yeah. So I mean, Get Out. I mean, he was in Black Panther. Now he's in another movie. He was in
Black Panther?
Yeah.
Was he the cousin or like the?
He was the dude that like had the rhinos.
Oh.
That was married to Okoye.
Oh, like the other tribe, of the blue tribe.
Yeah, of the one who originally was like
his
on
best
Killmonger's side. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
totally.
was him.
Oh
so
my goodness.
He's in all kinds of stuff now.
That I watched Black Panther like less than 3 months ago, so that's probably also where I recognized him from.
Yeah, and so I mean Get Out is another movie where I didn't really know what to expect going into it.
Me either.
I had just heard it was a really good horror movie and a really good movie, and so I was like, all right, let's see what happens. And that's another movie exactly like Cabin in the Woods, where if you go back now and watch stuff, there's so like the maid who ends up being the grandmother.
Right.
When he looks back in and sees her fixing her hair, it's so that you can't see the scar where they put her brain.
Right. And then because you only see the scar at the very end.
Right. And where the grandpa, who's the groundskeeper, is wearing the hat the whole time, so you can't see his scar.
Yeah.
There's like so much stuff that you just don't notice the first go round. That going back, you're like, oh. And the grandpa was like the track star. That's why he was running towards him in the garden. There's just so much stuff, and that movie still even played with my expectations of it's setting it up. And I really liked the scientist and his wife, and even his their daughter, his girlfriend. For a good amount of that movie, they played really good with your expectations.
Oh yeah,
of making them likable characters, and then slowly one by one, you're like, oh, I think something might be up with them. And they got me with the daughter until he found the pictures of her with the other. I thought she was cool, didn't know anything about what was going on. They were going to bust out together. And then he found the other pictures of all the guys she had brought home before. And I was like,
how dirty.
Yeah, it was like, it blew my mind. I couldn't believe it.
I was kind of catching on at that point. I think the snippet, like the little, 2 sentences that you see when you go to press play on a movie, I think for this particular movie said something along the lines of, is away with the family for a weekend? Are they acting strange because she's bringing home a black boyfriend? Are they acting strange because of so much more?
Yeah.
Ha ha ha. So going into it, I was kind of like, okay, I knew that, and that's really all I had,
Yeah.
And I thought it was a great movie. One of my favorite concepts of probably all time when it comes to horror movies. I thought it was a fantastic idea that they played out. I did kind of think the hypnotization thing was a little like weak, and they could have played on some of that a bit more, but in the Flash, the Flash brings you out of it, like that was kind of weird, that like that one thing, and he just so happened to be like a photographer. Like there were some parts where I was like, okay, I loved where this was going.
Story.
Yeah, exactly. So, like I say with every movie that I even moderately like, I would love to see a second one where we get a whole lot more information about that process, because they set it up with the grandma and grandpa and the pre-recorded tapes on the old TV so it could still play them, and the lab in the basement and their surgery room or whatever you want to say. Like there's still a lot there, and I think there's a lot of those guys too in those photographs that he was flipping through that the girl brought home that we never saw. So, there's sort of that we could continue to play off of. We still don't know how Dude Buddy with the TSA found him eventually.
Oh man, whenever the lights started kicking off on him at the end, I was like, he's about to get arrested for killing this entire white family.
That's exactly what I was thinking. He's getting arrested.
I was like, this is crazy. This is how this movie's going to end. And then when his buddy popped out, you could hear in the theater when the camera went up and showed his friend, everybody in the theater was like, yes!
Yeah, totally. I mean, I was screaming that on my couch sitting here in my own house. I think, another thing that sort of let me down about the movie was the sunken place, because they played that up hard in the trailers, that like that this might be like an out of your mind, like out of this world type of an experience. And then you really only see it a few times. And they're pretty potent scenes when they show it. Don't get me wrong. But I expected to see much more with that. Just to kind of have the, oh, now you're in a trance. Now I can always get you back into that place kind of thing. That seemed a little weak sauce to me.
Yeah. I can see your point. I understand that, but I mean it's literally like what we just said. There's kind of some liberties you have to take with
with any
certain
horror
movies, yeah. And so you just have to kind of be like, well, he's good. But I do love the camera work they did to show the sunken place, where it's him sitting on his bed and she like taps the tea glass and she goes sink, and he just goes, yeah. That, I mean, what a good first show for Jordan. Do you know who directed that movie?
No.
Jordan Peele from Key and Peele.
Oh, I did know that, actually, yes.
Yeah, wrote and directed. And I remember when people were like, Jordan Peele is writing and directing a horror movie. It's going to be, like, legit. It's not a funny horror movie. It's a legitimate horror movie. I was like, all right, yeah, I believe. It's the same thing with it. I was like, I'll believe it when I see it.
Yep.
And then when it came out, it was 98% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes or something. And I was like, okay, I guess this is pretty good.
The whole time I was watching it, I was waiting for one of those two to pop out from behind a bush and like add some kind of comedic relief.
Yeah, but
because it's just when you see that name, like you expect to see one of their two faces. But I think that the TSA guy, and I can never remember that actor's name, but
Lil Rel Howery.
He totally played that role though. Like he 100% just slid right into the role.
He was in an entirely different movie than what the rest of the movie was in.
Absolutely.
He was in a like 90s comedy from Martin Lawrence or something like that as like the funny best friend.
A Key and Peele skit. He was in a totally different
movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was, and I actually saw I don't know if it was a rumor. I might have come up with it. I don't even remember at this point. I just remember that I thought it was a cool idea for a sequel. But how this movie, and this was a movie that I thought made its point without making it about its point it was making.
Yes.
Like how we were kind of talking where people are winking their eye and they're like, you see what we did? We made a female the main character.
Right.
You guys would like this. And it takes you out of the movie entirely. This was a movie that proved its point without... It was a horror movie that proved a point. It was not a movie that proved a point that happened to be scary.
There were a few times where I was like, you might be pushing the bounds a little bit too far, and then like 5 minutes later I'd be like, yeah, you rode that back real good. You did that real nice. I'll have to give that to you. Okay, keep going. Let's see where this ends up, you know.
But my idea for the sequel would be, and it kind of posits on the fact that he would have been arrested at the end of the first movie, but it would be about how this movie tackled the point of kind of acceptable racism in households and just like public America. This would be him going to prison. You find out that this little thing that they were doing wasn't just at the house. It's become a national institutionalized system of this. And so the prison industry has become a part of it. And it's taking the African American population into prison, which is why they're being arrested so much, and making them into that. So it tackles the point of institutionalized racism in the prison industry while also being a scary movie about prison, and like he's trying to survive his life in prison but can't because people are after him.
You could also do one that plays off of this one playing off of the fact of physical superiority, because that's where a lot of this came from. Who can run faster? Tiger Woods hits the ball further. Other than the main guy himself, which he like wanted something deeper. He wanted his eyes, wanted that vision. I think you could do one same exact thing, but replace black culture with Asian culture and make it about actually wanting the smarts and wanting your brain
there's
power.
So much stuff they could do with
really
this concept.
Yeah. And then
there's
it would be like
things.
There's different sectors, and this is actually one big underground thing, and we're building up like all the physically fit people over here and all the increasingly intelligent people over here, and you could really go super deep with it.
Yeah,
I really liked the movie. It was probably my favorite one to watch. Like I felt like I was being drug along, like on the edge of my seat, kind of through that whole movie. Even though the first half is kind of slow, like the fact that something is coming and it's always right there around the corner, and there's so many little weird things happening in the background It kind of keeps you on the edge of your seat. I think it was a better movie. Like, if I had to watch one over and over and over again forever, it would probably be it instead of Get Out. But I think I enjoyed, especially on the first viewing, Get Out more.
Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of just like deep things in that movie too that you could take home and write academic papers on scenes like that. The scene that's supposed to hypnotize them and knock them out at the end, where he's tied up in the chair, picks cotton out of the chair and puts it in his ear.
Right.
Picking cotton saved his life. I mean, there's like so much stuff.
Right over my head.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much stuff that you could go back through. I was in motion picture studies major in college, so we watched movies literally to find things like that.
Yeah.
And so when I was watching that, I was like, oh my god, this and that, this and that, this, this.
That's brilliant.
There was so much stuff. But I mean, yeah, that movie is very deep. But I agree with you about it. If I had to watch one forever, it would definitely be it.
Yeah, totally. Out of the few that we've talked about today, at least.
Yeah, we didn't really cover a lot of ground. A lot more ground.
We always go into these things thinking, well, we'll be done talking about those. 10 minutes apiece, Yeah. And here we are, almost through the entirety of the podcast, and we've only covered a few movies. So, just what are some of your favorite horror movies of all time? Like, what are just some of the top of your list? I know you can't really maybe pick an absolute favorite.
Oh, I have an absolute favorite, just because it breaks the mold of favorite horror movie, but it's my second favorite movie of all time, or third favorite movie of all time. Scream.
I knew you were going to say that.
I love Scream. It is so good, and like the meta references it makes, it's another cabin in the woods scenario where if you are a horror fan, you can watch it as just Joe Blow off the street sitting down watching a scary movie. Cool, awesome, scary movie. They killed people. I was scared. He popped out of places. Cool mystery. I didn't know who was the killer. Found out at the end. Cool mystery. But if you are a horror fan, you get so much more out of it. That movie is winking at you left and right that just a regular audience will not pick up.
Yeah, that's one where, like, when that one's on TV, and if you land on it for just a few moments, like, there's some occasions where you don't know if you're watching Scream or if you're watching Scary Movie. Because there are a few of those like 20-30 second clips where it could go either way if you hadn't seen them in like a long time.
Scary Movie does do a very good job of capturing what Scream felt like.
Yes.
Like the same kind of camera movements, like the same shot positioning and stuff. I agree with that.
Yeah, totally.
And the first Scream originally started out being called Scary Movie.
Oh,
yeah.
Was that like a nod when they came out with the satire film?
Yeah, that was somebody was like, nobody's gonna go see a movie called Scary Movie. We got to call it something else. And so the people who ended up making Scary Movie as making fun of Scream and other horror movies was like, oh well, that'd be funny if we called ours Scary Movie. Yeah, let's do that. And now there's all these movies out there that make fun of the genre.
That's pretty cool. What are some of your others?
Oh gosh. I mean, I love just about anything. Slashers are my main. Slashers are my immediate go-to. Any Freddy, Jason, Michael, Chucky, Leatherface, Jigsaw to an extent. I mean, literally any slasher.
Jigsaw is
good to go.
Jigsaw's a Saw spinoff, right?
Jigsaw is a Saw sequel spinoff, which we might not end up ever seeing more of. But I mean the Saw in general.
Yeah, I like the Saws.
The Saw movies.
I like those because I have a tendency to like more thriller-esque, because they're,
and that's a lot like that.
They're horror movies, but they're not slashers. They're not zombies. They're not a creature film. It's more like Silence of the Lambs, where there's just a really horrible guy and you're watching a story play out around that just so happens to be particularly gory. Like body harm.
Yeah.
Fascination, I guess.
You gotta have a real tough stomach to get through those movies.
Yeah. I watched them all. They all kind of run together in my head. Like I separate them by like when the girl kind of steps in, like, and then I never even know if I saw Jigsaw.
It's okay.
I thought it did.
I watched them so much when I was a kid. I could figure out, like, the first movie was, or the odd number movies would be explaining something. The even number movies would be just about a main game with a twist at the end.
Yeah.
The next odd number movie that came out after that would be explaining the twist. It would have a game running the whole time, but it would be more about explaining the twist of the previous movie. And they follow suit, I mean, to a T. Back to back to back to back to back. I mean, the first one explains John Kramer, who Jigsaw is, whatever. It does have a crazy twist at the end, but they explain who he is. Second movie, just really about a game. Detectives trying to find his son. At the end, you find out Amanda's his accomplice. Third movie has a game running, but it's mostly about finding out how Amanda became his accomplice. Fourth movie, Detective Hoffman is his accomplice. Has a game running, but but Detective Hoffman is his accomplice. Fifth movie, all about how Hoffman became his accomplice. So it's like it breaks it down one by one by one, and you can figure it out that way. But the Saw series is interesting because I saw them broken up, and it almost doesn't matter. You get more out of it if you watch them in order.
Yeah.
But it's told so out of order anyway. It doesn't really matter if you watch it out of order.
It really is.
Yeah.
I definitely recommend watching the first one first because that sets you up for what you can expect.
Yeah.
I think very well. And it sort of introduces the concept. But after that, you probably could just free flow them however you want.
I think I saw them totally out of order when they were coming out. I saw like the second one, then the first one, then like the fourth one, then the third one, then the fifth one. Like it was just totally out of whack.
And then when those started getting popular, the Hostel movies started coming out, which was also sort of doubling down on the body gore thing.
Yeah. And that, I remember Hostel being one of the first tests that I almost it was like a personal test on myself that I took when I was a horror fan, when I was becoming more of a horror fan, of people saying, this is the scariest movie of all time. You can't make it through this movie. And I remember being able to make it through, and it was like a badge of honor for me. I was like calling my buddy who was real big into horror movies, and I was like, dude, you're never going to believe this. I just watched Hostel, and it didn't even scare me. Like, it was like me testing my limits, what I could do. Because the Grudge movie, that came out around the same time, scared the crap out of me.
I remember that one. I can't place it. I'm so terrible about titles. Movies just, sometimes they run together in my brain, especially with horror movies, because a lot of them look the same, and I'm very heavy on like how movies look. Like even like It Follows has a particular color palette.
Yeah.
But it has a very particular color palette. Like I sort of envision that more than I do anything else a lot of times. Mm-hmm. And a lot of horror movies have a tendency to just all roll up into one big gray, red, and black mess.
I think that's kind of what's so interesting, because we're going to break you out of that during the course of this podcast.
Yeah, totally.
But the horror in general is almost looked down upon as not as much of an art as other movies. Like it's one step up from adult entertainment, basically.
Right.
It's just one step up. So I think for a lot of people, a lot of like the common audience, it's lowest common denominator entertainment. It's, I want a couple scares, put on a horror movie. I don't have to care about the people. I don't have to care about the story. I'm just gonna see some people get chopped up.
And that's why I think you see a lot of what we were talking about earlier with like throwaway actors in these movies.
Yeah.
So a lot of times. But I also think that's why when a movie like all of the ones we've talked about today comes out, It Follows, Get Out, like they are so good at actually being movies that they sort of, rock the boat a bit in the movie world. And I think it's exactly for that reason, is that they typically are considered more bottom tier, lowest common denominator. And then when one really bursts onto the scene, it's like, whoa, that's right. We can do this the right way, And then you get into that trend where it's like everybody kind of does it the right way for a while.
Yeah, which is happening right now. Totally. There is a renaissance of good horror movies coming out right now. And of course, I'm sitting up on my pedestal over here. For every It and Get Out we have another 30 horror movies that are released straight to DVD that nobody ever even hears about.
And I think a lot of that like upward trend has been pushed by things like Stranger Things and American Horror Story, Black Mirror.
It's modernizing it. And it's with a lot of these streaming services that have these shows available, you're getting like a lot wider audience, and people are starting to discover
that they actually like the horror genre.
Mm-hmm.
And then when that happens, all of a sudden more people are buying tickets to go see horror movies. And when more people buy tickets, more movies get made. And I think that has helped a lot. It's sort of gotten that ball rolling.
Yeah, I mean, you can always kind of pinpoint, at least in a lot of like sub-genres of the horror movies, where things come in. Like 1978, Halloween came out, exploded in slasher movies throughout the 80s.
Right.
In the 90s, Scream came out, exploded in self-referential, like kids are too smart for the killer horror movies of the 90s and early 2000s. And now, like you said, there's starting to be this Netflix trend. There's this binge watch trend of teens, adults, like whoever, just going on Netflix and like, I'm bored, kind of in the mood for something scary, whatever. But they have it readily available at their fingertips.
And very well put together.
Yes. And turn it on. They love American Horror Story. When they get done with American Horror Story, down in the little right, next up, suggested for you because you like American Horror Story, this. And if they don't turn it off in 10 seconds, they're going to start watching that. Going to start watching that, this, that. And eventually leads them into being horror movie fans, which is why we have such a cool renaissance right now.
And I think we're getting some cool ones out of it. Like, people are starting to break the mold of the traditional, like, again, slasher, creature flick, Yeah. It's like you're getting more cerebral style movies, which is what a lot of those shows are really kind of like. You have to sit and think. Like, you do not want to have that playing in the background to keep you entertained. You have to sit and watch for most of them. And it almost appeals to the exact opposite of what we were talking about a moment ago with the lowest common denominator. Like, Halloween is a great movie that you can, any of the Halloweens, you can throw on at a Halloween party and have it going in the background, and that's good and dandy, and anybody can hop in at any time. You can't do that with Get Out. You can't do that with American Horror Story. You can't do that with all of these sort of, I guess, more high-level thought process plots.
Yeah.
But to me, that makes it more interesting. It makes it more like a traditional, like, big world, interesting, tell me more about this movie.
Yeah, and that's what I hope to see the world accomplish.
Yeah.
That's my number one thing for the world right now. Bring horror movies back to popular culture.
World peace and horror movies.
Horror movies and world peace. Let's be realistic.
Okay.
But I think we've gone over a little bit. We were both very clearly, probably me especially, jazzed up about being able to talk about horror movies in general. Our plan when we set out today was to talk more in general about horror movies. So we hope you guys enjoyed us just kind of spinning off of the couple of movies Crocker caught up on. There were a lot of really good movies. And this can lead now to, of course, even more horror movie stuff in the future. So we're happy that you guys stuck around for so long. We hope you enjoyed it, and we can't wait to see you on next week's episode.
Follow us on Instagram.
Oh God, I always forget that. At Crockalicious.
And at ScruffyMovies.
Okay. See you later.